Julia was content with the role of a sailor's wife. True, Michael wasn't actually a sailor, but his long business trips had to be explained to their acquaintances somehow. They met while studying. The technical college became the place where young cook Julia and talented welder Michael first crossed paths. A modest dorm room, their first jobs. Student days were behind them, but Michael's reckless lifestyle persisted. "Michael! Are you getting ready for work?" "It's almost 9, Julia nudged her husband. He had come home very late the night before and collapsed on the couch without even undressing. "Leave me alone." "I quit." "You go to work. I'm going to catch up on sleep." "What do you mean you quit?" "Why? How are we going to pay the mortgage?" But Michael wasn't listening anymore, and his response was a loud snore, sounding like a pig's squeal. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but remembering what day it was, Julia pulled herself together and rushed out of the apartment. Today, Julia had been called in by the restaurant owner, the small establishment where she had been working for 2 years. Rumor had it, he wanted to offer her the position of head chef. Everything would have been great if it weren't for Michael's eccentricities. "Sweetheart, we only live once. Why should I lead a boring existence like everyone else? I want to live life to the fullest. Fishing, football, a good bar." He would explain once again. "Get a stable job and relax on the weekends. Like normal people do. You always get fired after a month of work. I'm just a creative person. I have my own approach. Once I open my own workshop, we'll be living the dream." He'd give her another metal flower, and the cycle would start over again. Jacob, the owner of the restaurant, had noticed the young woman from the moment she started working for him. Julia was just his type, but the 20-year age difference and the wedding ring on her finger kept him from pursuing her. Recently, rumors reached him that Julia was having some family issues. Jacob noticed how she would fix her makeup after phone calls. Her sad face after weekends concerned him, but watching her come alive at work lifted his spirits. There was no doubt she was a talented cook and a good organizer, so Jacob made his decision. "Good morning, Julia," Jacob said as she entered his office. "Please have a seat." "Good morning, Jacob." "Thank you," she replied. On this Monday morning, Julia looked particularly captivating, but the sadness on her face made him want to embrace her and shield her from all her troubles. He cleared his throat and continued. "Over the course of your work here, you've proven yourself as a high-level specialist. You are respected by your colleagues, and there have been no complaints from management. I'd like to offer you the position of head chef." Julia had been expecting this offer, so she quickly responded, "I accept." "Thank you. You won't regret it." "I have no doubt about that. Tell me, is everything all right with you?" Julia looked away. "Forgive me if I'm intruding, but you're very important to me." In that phrase, Julia heard much more than just concern for an employee. She looked into Jacob's eyes carefully. He didn't look away and gave her a slow nod. "Thank you, Jacob. It's just some personal issues. You could always count on the team and on me personally." It felt as though a spark had passed between them. Julia had never noticed that look before. "Thank you. The secretary will prepare the documents for you." You can start your new duties tomorrow. Thank you. That evening, Julia decided to celebrate her promotion. Her co-workers congratulated her and suggested throwing a party, but she wanted to share this success with her beloved husband. She stopped by a cheesemonger, whose display window she admired every evening, and bought a selection of expensive cheeses she had long dreamed of trying. The one-bedroom apartment they had bought on a mortgage forced them to plan their purchases carefully, but today was a special day. "Honey, I'm home," Julia called from the hallway. "Can you grab the bags? We're celebrating tonight." A stranger emerged from the living room, smiling with a toothless grin, and croaked, "What's the occasion, sweetheart?" The bags fell from Julia's hands as she screamed, "Michael, somebody help. Don't yell like that. I'm from Michael's job. He invited me for a drink and then passed out. I'm already leaving." Frightened that the neighbors might call the police, the stranger edged out of the apartment with his hands raised. The place looked like a garbage dump. It seemed several guests had been there. Michael was asleep in the armchair, still wearing his muddy boots. The next morning, he apologized. Julia was upset, but she forgave him. After all, his friends often invited him to earn a little extra money. Welders were always in demand, though payment usually came in the form of alcohol. Jacob always got the information he needed from the staff. Everyone liked to chat with the boss. He knew more about Julia's life than her own friends. One day, after noticing a bruise on Julia's face, Jacob decided it was time to step in. "I've heard that your husband is quite skilled with his hands, and that he's an expert welder. Is that true?" "Yes, that's right." "Do you need something repaired?" Fear flickered in her eyes at the mention of her husband. The night before, he had gotten drunk over some work issues and hit her. No, of course, he didn't mean to. But he did. Julia had barely managed to cover up the bruise. Jacob's question came at just the right time. They desperately needed extra money. "A friend of mine is looking for skilled workers. They're building something up north and paying well. Good wages, housing, food, even phone expenses. They need workers immediately, and they're offering a solid advance." Julia swallowed. The offer was very tempting. "I need to discuss it with Michael." "Of course. But don't delay." "Thank you. We'll decide tonight." That evening, luckily, Michael came home sober and in a relatively reasonable state. At first, he didn't want to hear anything about a long trip, but Julia knew this was their only chance to stay on top of their mortgage payments. After some pleading, threats, and tears, she finally got his agreement. That same evening, she messaged Jacob. 2 days later, Michael flew out, and Jacob transferred a large sum of money to Julia's account. She was pleased. This money would allow her to forget about the mortgage for a year. Jacob was pleased as well. He had invested time and money to organize this assignment, but it was worth it. The woman he loved was blossoming before his eyes, and her energy was filling every corner of the restaurant with positivity and productivity. Julia missed her husband, the so-called sailor. Following Michael's own instructions, she told everyone he was away at sea. Occasionally, he returned home for a week and spent the whole time drinking. The little money that came her way barely covered the bills, But now that she was earning well herself, she had no complaints. Julia didn't question his work schedule, but he wasn't home for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. He had been working in shifts for almost 3 years now. One more contract, darling, and that's it. I'll come back, open my workshop, and we'll live the good life, he'd say. She waited and cherished every phone call and the rare photo. Jacob often stayed late at work just to have coffee with Julia or taste her new dishes. The boundary between them slowly faded. He wasn't pushy, and she was grateful for that. A long, loud ring at the doorbell startled the young woman. It was 4 in the morning. The bell rang again. A familiar voice came from behind the door. "Open up, honey. Your husband's home." "Michael!" gasped Julia. This time, he had been gone for almost 8 months. His phone had been out of service, and Julia had been extremely worried. But what could she do? Go searching for him in some unknown place? And now here he was. She rushed to open the door. Michael stood there, unshaven, thin, with a strange gleam in his eyes. "Hi, darling. I'm just passing through, off to another job. I mean, I'm sailing. You haven't forgotten I'm a sailor, have you?" He smiled, revealing the absence of 2 front teeth. "There's a taxi waiting for me downstairs. Hey, take care of this little one for a couple of months, will you? Her name's Emily. I'll come back for her. Just had some trouble with her mom. She passed away. And I don't have time for the kid. You're a woman. Just take care of her for now. Here are her things and her documents." Only then did Julia notice the little girl, about 2 years old, clinging to Michael's leg. Dressed in an oversized winter coat, she was hiding her face in the folds of his trench coat. He nudged the girl over the threshold and was about to leave, but suddenly remembered something. "Oh, and this is for you." He pulled a metal flower from under his coat, mumbled some apologies, and ran down the stairs. Julia filed missing person reports several times. She also searched for Emily's mother, but couldn't get any clear answers. Among the papers in the coat were a letter of relinquishment and a death certificate for Emily's mother. With great effort, Julia managed to secure guardianship over Emily to prevent her from being placed in an orphanage. Michael never returned. They were officially divorced in absentia. Jacob had stayed involved, discreetly gathering information about Michael's whereabouts through his connections. The company where Michael had been placed confirmed that he only worked for a year. After that, rumors suggested he had gone even further north, but no one could say for sure. It seemed like he had vanished without a trace. 3 years passed. Julia's life had transformed. She was flourishing in her career as head chef, a position she held with pride and confidence. The restaurant, under her leadership, had gained a stellar reputation, attracting more customers than ever before. Her bond with Jacob had deepened. He had been a constant source of support, not only professionally but also personally, helping her navigate the difficult times after Michael's disappearance. "Daddy! Daddy!" Emily, now 5 years old, ran up to Jacob, hugging his leg as he entered the kitchen of the restaurant. She had taken to calling him Daddy, and it warmed Julia's heart to see how naturally Jacob had stepped into a fatherly role for the little girl. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you ready for the party?" Jacob smiled, bending down to pick her up. "Yes. I made a present for Mommy." Emily beamed, her excitement infectious. "That's wonderful. Let's go surprise her." Jacob carried Emily into the dining room, where Julia was putting the final touches on the evening's special menu. She turned and smiled as she saw them enter. "You two are up to something, I can tell," Julia said, pretending to be suspicious. "Mommy, I made you something for your birthday," Emily said, holding up a homemade card. It was a drawing of a family, 3 figures holding hands, one tall, one medium, and one small. Above them was written, in shaky but legible letters, "Our family." Tears filled Julia's eyes as she knelt to hug her daughter. "Thank you, sweetie. It's beautiful." Jacob watched them with a smile on his face, his heart full. He had waited for this moment for so long. Julia, happy and at peace, and Emily, feeling secure and loved. "Daddy has a gift too," Emily declared, her eyes wide with excitement. Jacob reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Julia's breath caught in her throat as he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant engagement ring. "Julia," Jacob began, his voice thick with emotion, "these past few years have shown me how strong and beautiful you are. You've built a life for yourself and Emily, and I'm honored to have been a part of it. I love you, and I love Emily. Will you marry me?" Julia felt her heart swell. She had never expected this, a second chance at happiness, at family. She had fought so hard to keep her life together, and here, in this moment, she realized she didn't have to fight alone anymore. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, I will." Jacob slid the ring onto her finger, and as he stood, he pulled her into a tight embrace. Emily squealed with delight, hugging them both. As they stood there, wrapped in love, Julia's gaze drifted for a moment to the windowsill, where a single metal rose stood, a reminder of the past, but one that no longer had the power to overshadow the future. Their new life, full of hope, love, and the promise of forever, had truly begun.